Brother.
Sister.
Hello everyone, my name is Mekkah. Can I take a moment of your time to talk about our lords and saviors, the summoners in Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones? Cause I feel like we don't appreciate these units enough, and I'm gonna make a whole video dedicated to just them. I'm going to talk about exactly how they work, with all kinds of trivia, as well as their practical uses and an analysis of the playable summoners within Sacred Stones. So let's start with, how do summoners work exactly? The Summoner class is a new class in Sacred Stones. Just like the Druid, it can use dark magic and staves, but while Druids have been given the option to use anima magic, Summoners have a much more interesting power at their disposal. Every player phase, the Summoner has the option to, well, summon, just like a dancer has the option to dance. If you use the summon command, you get to spawn a phantom in an adjacent tile. A summoner can have one phantom on the field at a time, and this means you cannot summon a new phantom until your old one has been destroyed, but if you have multiple summoners, you can also have multiple phantoms. The phantom is a controllable player unit with a stat layout that's odd, to say the least. Their class description says, phantom warriors who possess great strength but vanish when attacked. This description matches their stats to a T, because their HP is always 1 and their defense and resistance are also capped out at 0. Any successful attack will destroy a phantom. Their other stats are more variable and change depending on who summoned the phantom and what level they are at, because the level of the summoned phantom matches the level of the summoner. The way their stats are generated is a lot like generic enemies. They have a set of class bases and then they auto-level using a set of class growths. However, there isn't just one set for phantoms. Instead, each summoner summons a different phantom class, and each of those phantom classes has their own bases and growths. This generally isn't too important in practice, but I'll get more into that later. Phantoms wield axes, and they bring their own weapon as they're brought into existence. At a low level, these are always iron axes, but as they level up, they get new options. From level 6 onwards, phantoms gain a small chance to come with a devil axe instead, and then from level 11 onwards, they actually get a significant 1 in 5 chance to get a killer axe. And at level 16 or higher, they also have a 1 in 9 chance to come with a tomahawk. This growth in their weapon arsenal matches their growth in weapon level, as base level phantoms have a D in axes and they steadily grow their way into an A rank, in their own weird morbid way. Normal player characters grow as they kill more enemies, but a regular phantom cannot gain experience even though they're not level 20. Their XP rating looks and works the same as a level capped unit. The only way to get a stronger phantom is to kill the one you have, level up your summoner, and then summon a new one. But that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to phantom trivia. There's plenty more to go through. Did you know that phantoms can fly? I'm guessing that's probably because it's supposed to be a spooky ghost, so even though it only has 5 movement, it is more mobile than some of your other units, and it can walk to places that others might find hard or impossible to reach. Weirdly enough though, while phantoms can walk over all kinds of terrain, they cannot be summoned onto any kind of rough terrain like thickets and peaks. They can be summoned on top of a mountain though, and from my testing, it seems that a phantom can only be summoned onto a tile that a summoner could walk onto. Another interesting thing about phantoms is the commands they have available. Even though phantoms come with their own weapons, they cannot do any item-related commands, such as trading or using a lord's supply. This is obviously to stop you from getting an infinite amount of access off of them, but sadly this also means that if a phantom kills an enemy with a droppable item or picks up a hidden treasure in the desert, there is no way to get that item off of your phantom, and instead that it will be taken to the grave the moment that phantom meets its end. But even beyond item-related commands, phantoms barely seem to have any options available to them at all. At first glance, it seems all they can do is wait or attack. For instance, they cannot rescue, even though they have an impressive constitution stat that should let them pick up some of your other characters. Well, they cannot rescue, but that doesn't mean they cannot carry people. For some reason, phantoms do have the ability to use the take command, which means that if you have one of your player characters pick up another, a phantom can take that other character and then proceed to ferry them across the battlefield. They can also use a drop command, so you can drop characters in those aforementioned hard to reach places if you want them to. Of course, they're much less flexible at this compared to flyers since they have less movement and they don't have canto, but it's still a very fun thing to mess around with, especially since they're disposable. Now that leaves some room for exploration. If a phantom is destroyed while holding a playable character, that playable character will be dropped on a nearby tile that they would otherwise be able to travel on. My testing suggests that they go to the nearest traversable tile, and if there are multiple tiles that are at the same distance from the tile where the phantom died, it works with a priority system. And that system, coincidentally, seems to be the same as the one that determines how the rescue staff works. This means that the game prioritizes up, then left, then right, and then down. I haven't tested this super extensively because this really is the most trivial of trivia, but that seems to be the way it works. I think that's enough trivia on technicalities though. How about we get into some more practical uses for summoners and their phantoms in gameplay. The biggest and most important purpose of the phantoms is their ability to act as lightning rods. The combination of 1 HP and 0 in both defenses is just about the most attractive thing possible for the enemy AI. They will almost always, without fail, go for a phantom, as enemies are programmed to kill whenever they can. This ability is what made me want to make a video on them in the first place, because it saved my butt several times during an Iron Man run of FE8. Take this scenario for example. I've moved Colm into quite a precarious position. These mercenaries, when they combine their attacks, they will kill him. They won't double or one round him, but combined they will kill him. I have moved most of my other units out of the way, and Mulder is nowhere near enough to save Colm. I do have my phantom available though, so what I can do is I can summon a phantom right here, and put him next to Colm, and one of the mercenaries will see that they can kill the phantom and kill him, and then they won't be able to kill Colm, because it doesn't die in one round. And even though Colm was in range of 2 enemies that combined could kill him, the phantom just saved his life. Sometimes there are dangerous enemies with enormous ranges that you would rather not take a hit from, such as these shadow shot gorgons or these sages with bolting. They might be too far away to reach for your other characters, and you don't want them to get a lot of free pot shots in, but they will always go for a phantom if you have one out, which saves you the hassle of dealing with their damage every turn. The last use of phantoms, and this is a minor one, is that they can provide a nice extra bit of attacking range, as they effectively act as an extension of your summoners themselves. If a summoner walks 6 tiles and then summons a phantom who can walk 5 more tiles, it's basically as if they're capable of reaching 11 tiles away. Now, a phantom isn't exactly a great attacker in most situations, but it does give you a bit more reach if you need to do a small amount of damage, for example to kill Gorgonags in chapter 18. And those are the main uses of summoners and their disposable phantoms. Now, how about we go take a look at the actual characters that can summon. The summoner class is only obtainable by 2 characters from the main campaign, Knoll, the shaman, and Ewan, the pupil. Both of them have other promotion options, but today I'm going to try and convince you that Summoner is by far the best option for both of them, since that's more to offer than any of the other classes they can become. And of course I'm also going to talk about Lyon, who you can recruit in the Creature campaign, as it's basically a Summoner as well. Let's take a look at Knoll first. From these 3, Knoll is the most straightforward Summoner to get. He joins in chapter 15 in both routes, and you can instantly promote him using a Guiding Ring or a Master Seal since he joins at level 10. At first glance, it might seem silly to promote a unit instantly before they've had the chance to grow any levels, but in the case of Knoll, there really is no point in waiting, since his stats are very poorly suited for combat. In particular, his speed is horrendous. He has a base of 8 and he gets weighed down by the heavy dark tomes as well. Even Flux, the lightest of the dark spells, reduces his speed by 1, so generally the only things he's going to be able to double attack are very slow enemies like Armor Knights. And with his 35% speed growth, that isn't changing anytime soon. Trying to make Knoll able to double attack things would take a lot of grinding, stat boosters, or just plain good luck. He's also very squishy. He's got a base HP of 22 and a base defense of 2. Between those defensive stat and his low speed, there will be a lot of enemies that can defeat him in one round of combat. And again, his growths are not good enough to get him out of this hole, particularly when it comes to his defense, where he only has a 10% chance to grow. If that doesn't convince you that Knoll is bad at fighting, take a look at his luck stat. It's a plain 0 with a 20% growth. Every enemy is going to have a chance to get a critical hit on Knoll, which will generally be an instant kill. You could give him the Hoplin Guard to protect him, but with all these other problems I mentioned before, there really is no reason to have Knoll face attacks at all. The only fighting that Knoll should do himself is from a safe distance, to avoid counterattacks. He's actually not too bad at it, since his magic is pretty decent and he hits on enemy resistance, which is usually lower than their defense, but most of the time, Knoll should leave the fighting to units other than him, which includes the units he can make. There's just no point in making him a druid, since that class doesn't give him anything that makes up for the loss in utility he would have as a summoner. But as a summoner, Knoll is actually really useful. Instead of endangering himself with his low defensive prowess, he can keep others safe using the phantoms. And since he requires absolutely no training to promote, there really isn't any opportunity cost to using him, other than a unit slot, and you get a lot of those in later chapters. Now, Ewan is a little different. He joins you as a pupil in chapter 12 of both Erica route and Ephraim route. As a pupil, Ewan can go down to quite a few different branches. Once he hits level 10, he can become either a mage or a shaman. And if you make him a mage, you can then continue into either the Sage or the Mage Knight classes, whereas if you make him a shaman, he follows the same path that Knoll was on, with the option to go into either Druid or, of course, Summoner. There's also a secret third path where you can promote into what is commonly known as a Super Pupil, which is a class that looks just like Pupil but can use all 3 branches of magic, although unlike all the other classes I just named, it cannot use stats. From what I can tell on the internet, Summoner is not the most popular class for Ewan, but I think it's by far his best choice. With the other classes, Ewan will mostly play the same, with some small statistical differences. If you tried out different classes on different playthroughs with your Ewan, if you notice a huge change in how strong he was, it's more likely due to RNG than your class choice. Regardless of what class he goes into, his best tome most of the time will be Thunder or Flux, both of which have the same might, and the differences between his most important offensive stats are small, usually within 1 or 2 points depending on the path. And in fact, when it comes to speed, the Summoner path gives him the highest total, tied with the Druid. The only significant advantage that I can see in other classes is the mount that he gets from going into Mage Knight, but the Mage Knight only has 7 movement compared to the 6 movement that other classes have, so it isn't even a very big advantage. But it does come with some extra utility through rescuing Kanto, so it's not without benefits. Still, I think Summoner is better than anything other classes have to offer. The ability to distract enemies from hitting your other units, potentially saving them from death, is just so useful. Plus, if you're going to focus on summoning, you could even consider just promoting Ewan as a level 10 shaman, just like Knoll, instead of waiting a bit longer. Of course, if you want Ewan himself to fight a lot, it might be wise to wait a little bit longer and take advantage of his higher HP gain, but that depends on what you want out of him. Of course, the biggest problem with Ewan is that he's so weak upon joining. His bases are terrible. His 15 HP and 0 defense are so low that many enemies just straight up one-shot him. And to make things even worse, his speed is only 5, so enemies with 9 attack speed or more will be able to double attack him. His base 3 magic and E rank in tomes is also worrisome, as that means he's only ever going to do a maximum of 10 damage, but at the very least he gets to attack enemy resistance, which is often lower than enemy defense. The fact that he uses magic is also advantageous for avoiding enemy counterattacks, a problem that, for example, Emilia has to deal with when she's using a Slim Lance. At least when attacking from a distance, a miss isn't a total disaster, and he's a little more flexible with that 1-2 range and where he can attack from, but on the other hand, he does only have 4 movement. Ewan does improve over time, but raising him is a test of your patience. Sacred Stones does offer a lot of ways to make this easier and less risky, such as slower paced maps in the main campaign, as well as the optional battles outside of the story, so if you really want to, you can get Ewan caught up within 1 or 2 maps. Personally, I try to play without extra battles or any kind of grinding, and I also try to judge units within those parameters, and I think no matter what you do with Ewan, he's not going to be worth the amount of effort it takes to get him to promote. The payoff isn't very significant, as his average stats aren't all that much better than other units such as Sally and Lute, but to each his own. That ties into why I think Summoner is the best class for him. I don't need to worry about his own stats at all, and I can even promote him at level 10 if I want to, without worrying about his long-term prospects, since just like Knoll, Ewan will be useful regardless of what his stats are. I know a lot of players feel bad for not maxing out his potential, but I do recommend you give this method a go sometime. There is one weird misconception that I see people mention sometimes, and that is the fact that Ewan makes a bad summoner because his phantoms have worse stats than Knoll's and Lyon's. Now, I disagree with this on multiple levels. For one, obviously there is no reason to only use one summoner. If the summoner class is the best for Ewan, then it really doesn't matter that Knoll also happens to be one. There are plenty of spots where having 2 phantoms on the field is just nice. Even if you only need 1 phantom at a time, you could just have 1 summoner attack or heal instead. There are cases where it's valid to only want 1 unit of each class, but this is not one of them. But secondly, why do your phantom stats matter at all? They are capped at 1 HP and 0 in both defenses. The whole point of them is to be disposable. I could do a detailed analysis of exactly what every summoner's phantom stats look like with their different bases and growths and everything, but it really doesn't matter. I've always found this such a baffling way to look at summoners, and honestly this point of view is one of the reasons I'm making this video in the first place, so I have this timestamp to refer to whenever I see it pop up. With all that behind us, let's take a look at the final summoner, Lyon, who supposedly has the strongest phantoms of them all. Lyon is a secret character only available to those who continue playing after the game is over. He joins you if you clear the Lagdu ruins 3 times, and I think most people who play Sacred Stones will not get this far, as that is a very tedious affair. I consider Lyon to be a trophy character, as unlocking him will probably be the very last thing you do on a Sacred Stones game. Once you've gotten him, there is probably nothing left to achieve except infinitely battling monsters, but of course he is fun to play around with for a bit. Lyon technically is not a summoner but a necromancer, though the class basically works the same. He can use dark magic and staves, and of course summon phantoms. Lyon's class is home to a lot of misconceptions. Some people think he can use all kinds of magic, which he cannot do, and some people think he can get multiple S ranks, which he cannot do. In fact, Lyon is pretty modest for a final unlock. His base stats other than his high magic aren't very impressive, though he does come with the Naglfar tome, which is the strongest and most accurate dark tome in the game. It's not effective against monsters, but neither is the legendary Gleipnir tome, so it's really no worse in that regard. Lyon's base power with the Naglfar is so good that he'll have no trouble disposing of most monsters he will find, though it might be wise to throw him some Goddess icons, since his base lock is only 4 and you don't want him to get crit. His defense could also use a bit of work at only 17, and without any body rings or speed wings, he's gonna have very low avoid due to the huge weight of the Naglfar. Since Lyon is so effective at disposing of enemies on enemy phase, summoning with him is almost a waste of time since it just distracts enemies from hitting him. But it's still a cool power he has that's fun to mess around with, and you could still use the Phantom to help your other units. And I think that's pretty much all there's to say about Lyon, so there you have it, 3 different summoners. If you ask me, the summoner that gives you the most value for your money is Knoll. He takes no time to train or unlock, and his stats make it clear that he was not meant to do anything other than be a utility unit. Like, to be fair, this video was going to be a waifu on Knoll, but then I realized that the phantoms he can make will be the focus of the video anyway, and I thought I might as well get Ewan and Lyon involved. So, in a way, this was waifu phantoms. I hope that after watching this, you're looking forward to experimenting with the different summoners that Sacred Stone has to offer. They are a lot of fun to use, and I legit do think that their abilities feel a little overpowered at times. That's probably why you don't get access to them early in the game. Thank you for watching. If you had a good time with this video, please don't forget to summon an additional like down below, or perhaps a comment. I would also like to thank my patrons on Patreon for supporting me in making this video, especially my A-tier Patreons, and especially my S-tier Patreons, Aquaclash, Boots, Colin, Command List, Corey, Crimson Blader, Heliosan, Hunty Wunty, Ice Lake, Jacob, Moo, Nikhil, P. Vladias, Reese's Puffs, Scott Mitchell, Skylar, Stuart Graves, and Swordlocked. You guys are seriously the best, and you are the reason why I can hire people to make these videos look better than I ever could. For example, there is Rin, who designed the thumbnail, and of course there's the Fritos, who edited it for me. Again, thanks a bunch for all the support from you, and until next time.